Phil Duncan is an Aboriginal Cultural Training Coordinator, Walangulmoro, Macquarie University. And the topic is exactly, what does strong collaboration look like? Now, Phil is a member of the Gomeroi Nation. He's an elected representative of the Gomeroi Nation native title Claimant group. His homelands are Moree and Terry Hi. He's got more than 38 years' experience working with Aboriginal people and government to improve the lives of Aboriginal people through recognition of such a rich cultural history, the return of the lands, the improvement of living conditions and education of the next generation, and he does that through both his employment and active volunteer community work. There's a much longer bio on the website, but I think it's best that we leave this space here for Phil Duncan. Will you please make him very welcome?
Yama, Māori and Yini, that's hello, men and women in my language, the Gomeroi. As it is customary, I want to acknowledge country. I want to firstly thank Walter for a warm and sincere and very interactive welcome to country. Welcome to countries and acknowledgement of countries are just modern day interpretations of an ancient custom and practice where one seeks and receives permission to move through lands beyond our own traditional boundaries. And I was very honoured to be asked to stand with the traditional owners at the smoking ceremony. I want to acknowledge the elders of the Noongar Nation. Uncle Farley, great to reconnect with you after many years. Our Aunt Carol and the many Aboriginal women in here, our elders, our knowledge keepers, I want to acknowledge you. And thank you for making me feel like this is just an extension of my home. It means the world to me. To everybody else that I've met, but particularly to my Tagan, my brother, my language, Tagan is brother, and Barwara is sister, but my Tagan, Dave Collard, I can't tell you, words will not convey how grateful I am to be afforded the opportunity to speak before this audience and in such a wonderful forum. And to you, the rest of the people, as collaborators, as changes of thinking and challenges of the way forward, and educators of the wider community about our Indigenous integrity, values, customs, and our way of life, and more importantly, our cultural responsibilities to care for country. Before I start with my PowerPoint, there is no paper. I'm going to talk to you about my experiences from the eastern side of Australia. And I want to start out by asking you a self-reflective question. It's not for public consumption, it's just for you to ask yourself. Ask yourself, am I a confident communicator in the Indigenous space? We're all good communicators. We all have to be. But for you to realise your full potential to be a collaborator and a champion or an accomplice for Indigenous society, I need you to ask yourself, am I a confident communicator in the Indigenous space? And if the answer is no, ask yourself, what do I need to do? And I think the answer's in front of us. I want to start out with a bit of a statement. In the Aboriginal worldview, we, as people and country, including our lands, waterways and our seas, are independent entities that are intrinsically linked in the landscape through culture and spiritual significance. This means that there is no separation of nature and culture. The health of our natural environment and our cultural well-being of our people is directly influenced by the health of our cultural landscapes. Over these millennia, we have sustainably managed our lands, waters and natural resources for the health of our countries and the health of our peoples. We have understood the importance of water and its centrality to life, its centrality to culture, and we've cherished it accordingly. We exist in harmony and in pain with our cultural landscapes. Our traditional ecological knowledge, I want you to think about this, our cultural science. Our cultural science. I think we've transgressed past traditional ecological knowledge, and hopefully I can convey a message as to why. So where was I? Like our stories are passed down from generation to generation and continue to this day. This allowed us to live in a symbiotic relationship with our land and our waters and our seas. We used it, we lived from it, we nurtured it. We had a sustainable relationship. Our use was sustainable and continues today where it can, through the dispossession and mismanagement of our lands and waters, with disregard to our cultural knowledge and understanding of our cultural landscapes. We have witnessed the detrimental impacts on both our peoples and our cultural landscapes. I want you to think about that as I go through. And that self-reflective question, I want it to be paramount in your minds. So I want you to think about that. One of the key values I place being on in a tertiary education is challenging tomorrow's scientists. Challenging them to challenge science. We all live in a world of resource shrinking availability, but the knowledge never leaves us. Resources will come and go. 60,000 years of knowledge. And my talk today is about collaboration. It's about us as Indigenous people and representatives of our cultures and our nations and our families and our clans being able to be sitting in a safe environment where we can have the necessary courageous conversations to change the way people think about how we interact with one another. Another thing I want you to think about is we are going to be judged by the next generation about the state of the environment we live in, that we leave them. We live on the driest inhabited continent on this planet. Drought has been a part of life since time immemorial. And climate change is here to stay. So, you know, now that I've got my little bit of politics out of the road, hopefully I can challenge you, entertain you, and hopefully get you to realise your potential to be not a champion. Champions can come and go. Accomplices stay with us in the entire journey to be a better, stronger accomplice. So yes, what does strong collaboration look like? And again, Dave, thank you. It means the world to me to give you what we do on the eastern seaboard or on the eastern side of Australia, and hopefully take you on a journey of giving you a look at my country and what we are doing in the way of going forward in collaborative partnerships. There's this new and endearing term coming out of science. It's called nothing about us without us. You know, you need to understand that, Aunt Carol, thank you for being, if you're here, where are you? Forgive me, Aunt. You know, when there was a courageous question asked yesterday, can I have that knowledge? No, you can't, you've got to earn it. And this new term, nothing about us without us, is the platform for you to go forward, to learn more about us, to be gifted the responsibility of our songline connections to country and our cultural responsibilities. Now, it's not a responsibility, it is an obligation to care for country. In my area, we're calling it repairing country, and you'll see why. This is my mentor, my grandfather, standing under the tree that he was born under. That tree still stands. And that's me taken in February this year when I took 14 PhD candidates to my country at Terry High High. And that's me under the same tree. His placenta was buried there. These photos are 47 years apart. My father is his oldest of 12, 9 boys and 3 girls, and I'm the oldest of 127 grandkids. No TV back then. I have 4 daughters and I have 10 grandkids of my own. When we talk about valuing diversity and these collaborations, my 4 daughters, the oldest one is with an Italian Aboriginal, the second one is with a non-Aboriginal farmer, the third one is with a Sikh Indian Aboriginal man, and my baby girl who's just turned 22 is with an Egyptian man. So I live diversity every day. And they are great men, but you know what, I want to just quickly touch on this. It gives my kids and my grandkids the opportunity to learn about different cultures, and where we can look into mirrors at some times, but at no time do they walk away from the fact that they are First Nations people of this wonderful country, particularly the Gomeroi Nation. And my wife is from the Yuin Walbunja clan on the south coast, which starts at Wollongong and goes all the way down to Eden, or to the Victorian border. So my kids and my grandkids dance in both worlds, salt water, fresh water. We call it salt water and muddy water. This is important. This tree still stands. And the area, Terry Hi is now an Aboriginal conservation place. And there is a management committee in place. Self-determination, self-management, in partnership with government. DPI, I won't say DOPI because it's the Department of Primary Industries and Environment, so they took out the own, they'd just say DPI. I think it sounds better than DOPI. Anyway. This is my dreaming. This is the dinner wand, my mother, that lives in the Milky Way. This was taken on the 8th of February this year at Siding Springs Observatory on my country at a place called Coonabarabran. You can see Saturn, Venus, Jupiter, and the full moon. And when the legs are down, that's when the emu's laying their emu eggs. That's when you go hunting and gathering. Unfortunately, I'm not allowed to, part of my law, LORE, is that I can't eat emu. I can't have emu feathers, I can't have emu eggs, as much as they are so beautiful when carved with 36 different shades of green. I am not allowed to have any emu products, neither are my daughters, so that's that story, that responsibility and the connection through to the next generations. And it's a wonderful image, but it also guides us. This reinforces how we interact with these cultural landscapes. And we are guided by the stars, and just not by our trees, our rivers, our sites of significance. We also look to the heavens. This is my songline, connection to country. It's a place called Bluebird Lagoon. And it's just off the McIntyre River on the Queensland-New South Wales border. I'm going to mention names over here, some of your names. So it's at Gundawindi, near Boggabilla, on the back road to Boomai and Mungandai. So I thought I'd get one back because they fell into, wow. And it was a water skiing lagoon. It is now got it's an registered Aboriginal place, and it has an Aboriginal management committee. They make the decisions. No longer is there water skiing on there. There is burial sites because the land is so sandy, so porous. So we've got management strategies, protection strategies. And my spiritual connection to that is that of Gurria, which is a crocodile-like serpent with a snake's body. And just recently out on the Narran Lakes, some archaeologists found bones of crocodiles, huge bones of crocodiles. And those of you that don't know, the Narran system is just a little bit north of us. Okay. This is Indigenous Australia. You think about, yes, we are a people of this country, but look at the diversity. And this is just the language maps. This is just the language maps. We are same, but we are different. Our culture is same, but different. And I want you to think about this as I go forward. Water, I call it gully. What price do you put on gully? My grandfathers, as I said, one was born under a tree at Terry Hi beside the Terry Hi River. The other one was born on the banks of the mighty Murrumbidgee River. And stories about not being able to go into my grandfather used to tell me we were never allowed to go in the rivers or the waterways or the lagoons with any animal fat or body paint or ceremonial paint on us for fear of upsetting the ecological cycle, the fish, habitat. And my grandfather, hopefully I get this right, said, "That's my nation." And he said, "You know, boy," he said, "our nation's the lungs to the northern part of the MurrayDarling Basin." What's that shape like? 9 rivers and the Great Artesian Basin. My other grandfather, my mum's father, that was born on the banks of the Murrumbidgee River, was a mighty swimmer. And Uncle Jimmy Ingram was telling me back in the day that he was that good a swimmer he used to be able to walk the bottom of the Murrumbidgee River. and he used to dive for the police to find bodies, and he used to get paid per dive. So he'd go down, he'd find the body, he'd swim over and put it up under a log, and come back up, not here. 10 dives later, he'd come up, it's here. So he'd earn his quid for the family. But these, look, a little bit of humour, I think that's one thing you need to know, that through the past 230 odd years, the trials and tribulations and our progression and our desire to raise our voices in the decision-making arenas to care and repair for our country and our obligation, humour is always interwoven into it. And, you know, the other thing you need to think about with this is I've had the wonderful opportunity to sit with a couple of beautiful people, and their passion for wanting to be involved, to raise their voices, to represent the rights and interests of their people. Don't misinterpret as being angry. Look beyond that. Look beyond that. And the other thing as we go forward, when you think it's too hard, I want you to think about what we're leaving the next generations. When you think it's too hard, take a step back and look at it through the eyes of the children and the grandchildren. And that should make you more committed to quality collaboration. There's a message in there somewhere. I'm in my second term with CSIRO's National Indigenous Strategic Advisory Council. When I took the CSIRO leadership team to Gomeroi last year, this was our banner. And such was the cultural impact on that leadership team, they've now got the Indigenous Futures Women's STEM program, $25 million funding, Indigenous Women's program. But the science is Indigenous-led, but in collaboration. This is what can happen when we bring like-minded people to the table and leave your preconceived positions at the door and come with a wondering mind to learn. In the MurrayDarling Basin, I actually, don't hold it against me, I sit on the Basin Community Committee. And it's a difficult gig. It's a difficult gig. And there are 16 of us on there. But there's a message in there about how we managed, how we interacted with what I call our cultural landscapes and used our cultural science, and this is a little place called Winggarry. I was up there 3 weeks ago at St George, looking at Beardmore Dam and the Balonne and Murraynoa rivers. And these are the Aboriginal rock wells where my nation's people travelled down to Bluebird Lagoon from southwest Queensland, and they used to stop here at Winggarry for fresh water. Because it was a 3-day, 4-day hike to get to Bluebird Lagoon from up near St George. This is what collaboration can bring about. The protection of sites of cultural significance, but to also be used as educational sites for next generations, protection for prosperity. It's not just my kids, my grandkids that I want to know about these sites. You should be wanting your children and your grandchildren to learn more about Indigenous society and this strong cultural obligation to care for country and protect country. This is Moree. This photo was taken 2.5 years ago. That was taken last Monday. Where I took that photo from, I would have been underwater, normally underwater, and I drove the car down. The northern part of the MurrayDarling Basin is crippled, and the people are crippled with it. There's no rural industry that drives a rural economy that drives what I grew up in, an amazing labour market. And the only way we can bring this back is to be all sharing the resources. At the moment, where we are operating in a vacuum of resource availability. We keep bringing our knowledge to the table. We keep bringing it in good faith. So I just want you to think about that what we need to do. This is a reality of where my people live. This is what happens. when water sharing plans and water resource plans that are over-extracted where supply cannot simply meet the demand. Fish kills on the lower Barker. It's not the Darling in the Parkinge's name, it's the Barker River. And climate change has had an impact on this, yes, so has drought. But when you get water sharing plans and water resource plans that, forgive the pun, drown out the Indigenous voice and our desire to be involved in the decision-making, well, the planning and the decision-making and the evaluation of these water resource plans, these are some of the impacts. So together now with the Native Fish Management Recovery Strategy that's just gone through MINCO, the Ministerial Council of the MurrayDarling Basin, we have now got a collaboration with Indigenous-led science with Western science. And what I'm saying with that, it is bringing cultural science and Western science together. For too long we've had this. And you know what, the fire stick, there's all these Indigenous methodologies of caring for our country that people are going, I get it. So the time is now for us to start doing this, bringing it together, because both can be innovative ways of how we go forward. And particularly from a tertiary education's perspective, we need to look at curricula. We need to look at Indigenous connected curriculum projects that came out of Universities Australia's report, where we are integrating Indigenous values, knowledge, way of life, cultural science into curricula. One of my dearest friends at Macquarie University, just recently retired, Professor Richie Howard. There's a message in there. It's important for me to, now this man was also around in the late 70s when the most innovative act recognised by the United Nations Permanent Indigenous Forum. In New South Wales, we have the New South Wales 1983 Aboriginal Land Rights Act, recognised as the most progressive act of any state in the world for Indigenous people. It is not the National Native Title Act of 1993, it precedes it by 10 years. And it was compensation for dispossession and relocation. So it's its own body that manages its own fund. The Electoral Commission runs the elections across 9 regions that give 9 board of directors as a result of that. It's a pretty amazing statistic, isn't it? Up top. We're still oppressed, we're still marginalised. And, you know, I still believe we live in what I call an internal locus of control. Our lives are governed by the decisions others make. And it's time for us to step outside of that, particularly when it comes to any initiatives about working on our country, representing the rights and interests of our people. We've had an amazing former mechanism in the federal arena that was taken away from us, but that should not dissuade us from going forward collaboratively, learning. We have to use the instruments of government, but we have a right to be engaged. The Native Title Act, I mentioned the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Rights Act of 1983, the Water Act. The Water Act only has to give regard to Indigenous values. And I'm going to talk a little bit what needs to change in that area. Because for a successful NRM, water is central to that. Any projects, you need water. I think nearly 90% of our bodies are made up of water. So we are interconnected with Gali as well. And the free, prior and informed consent, I want you to think about that. A lot of people use it as throwaway lines over my way. Free, prior and informed consent. Based on the connection to country and the elected representatives of the people, particularly what we're talking about here in WA, the right for them to be engaged on the platform of free, prior and informed consent, the right for them to seek advice from their elders, their communities on how we go forward with this, how we can go forward in unison with you. Cultural values of water. This is my nibi, my snake. So, you know, protected by law, our songlines, our dance, our dreaming stories. We must reconnect with our traditional water knowledge and our methodologies. How the old people did cultural science. How they tell our stories. Auntie Carol again yesterday and the other two presentations, and I know that I'm going to get a couple more today. We need to interweave these stories about our connection to country into any educational tools for the wide. We've got to make sure that we're widening our lenses on the impacts that we can have, particularly in schools, high schools, and as I said, we've already got the mechanisms for tertiary education. It's got to be a culturally safe environment for us to enter into those meetings and spaces where we can have the courageous conversations and not be labelled as troublemakers because of our passion and the way we talk, about wanting to care for our country. In where I live, we're not going to get it back to its former glory, but we need to strive to get it back to part of its former glory. Validate our science, cultural science. Creation sites, cultural heroes, linking spiritual significance along the songlines, dreaming tracks. Language, the first thing we had taken from us was our language. And to sit here in awe, I'm in awe of the fact that our MC, Minister and other people have opened up their talks, and the Chief Scientist of WA, talking in language. The impact that that's had on me has been amazing. But I want to clearly state, words are words. Actions speak louder than words. And you know, if you feel an obligation to do it, don't do it because it's not going to mean anything. Do it because you want to do it and make a difference. Do it because you want to leave a legacy, and I'll talk more about that as we go through. Resource sites. Our artefacts. You know, well, first and foremost, bush foods and bush medicines. David, thank you so much for the gift of the two books, Native Veg and the Bush Medicines. I'm going to have some very interesting reading to do. I want to learn about what's going on here. And there's another project for me to take back to my country. You know, gender-specific sites, women's and men's business. I'm not going to talk about a women's business, that's for sure. No way. When they do, they make the ground shake. And they make the men shake too. But you know, just the resource sites, our artefacts. I saw a wonderful image yesterday afternoon of the ochre mounds. And yes, they would have been traded from one side to the other, from north, south, east to the west, because that's what we do. Ceremonial sites, birthing places, sites known and unknown. I say unknown because there are some sites that we will not tell you about. And that's okay. That's okay. It's not us being smart, it's just us protecting the really sacred sites, the creator sites. So, you know, surface water and groundwater, specific values, the teaching sites, massacre sites. One of Australia's, my country, the Myall Creek Massacre. There were two others. There was the one at Waterloo Creek, then they moved on to Myall Creek with 28 women and children. Women and children. The men weren't there. And then you had a place called Slaughterhouse Creek between Moree and Inverell. It still stands. It's important that we acknowledge the past because it's relevant as we go forward. For us to create an environment and a space for our next generations to enter into with confidence about partnerships and collaboration, we need to acknowledge this so that we don't make the same mistakes as we go forward. So the past is relevant today. You know, if you want to look at the first real media that came out in 1938, the Abo Call, you wouldn't call the paper that nowadays. But in the first edition, they had a 10-point plan. Better access to health, education, housing, employment, a voice in Parliament. And we have the Uluru Statement from the Heart. You know, sorry, Minister, but if state governments can go forward, you don't have to wait on the feds. Keep this collaboration going with these people. Own it, because if you build it, the others will come. cultural specific environment, look, the totemic species, the Yutundali the goanna, the Dinawan the emu, Biggie Billa the porcupine. That's my language, they're my totems. The Bunda the kangaroo. They're all so important. So we had a cultural economy, yes, we barred it. That cultural economy still stands. This way we exchange knowledge. It's not about money. It's not necessarily about money. Remember, we live in a world of shrinking resource availability. Physical, tangible, and non-tangible evidence. When we talk about cultural association, the spiritual association with Gali water and our rivers that are our arteries and the veins of our life and our country, if you can't be seen, people challenge it. Understand there's that invisible connection. It is true. It lives, it exists, it beats within us every day. It beats within these people every day. We want it to beat within you every day. That's what true collaboration is about. When my heart beats, I want you to feel it. The seasonal indicators, I'm going to show you something in what we've done with CSIRO with the seasonal changes and our seasonal toolkit. This is our vision. So I mentioned about the 2007 Water Act. It only has to give regard to. And what we're saying over our side of the country is okay, because the Water Act is impacting here too. So we want to amend Part 6A to include Indigenous-led water research and units, a First Peoples water advisory tank, a First Peoples water think tank, water strategy. And you've got the CHEW, the Commonwealth Environmental Water Holder. Why not have a First Peoples water holder? It's okay to be free thinking. It's okay to put these options up to think about. And someone said, oh, it'll never happen. I'm saying, we waited 230 odd years to get to this point where we can have a voice. Another couple of years ain't going to hurt us. And the point I make there is we've got to keep walking the walk and talking the talk together. We've got to keep the dialogue going. Because the minute we stop talking, the minute the messages are diminished and we lose sight of the way forward. This is my watershed. This is my cultural appropriate engagement model. It's just me. It's, if you want to use it, part of my culture is I gift you these images today. I leave this with you, particularly with my mob that I feel very connected to. So we are always looking for partnerships, but we want to protect our cultural knowledge, our cultural integrity, our way. So everything we do evolves around my cultural values by creating an understanding, and we can never ever really plan for more than 4 years. Why do I say that? What was that? Term of government. As I call it, government of the day. Slap on the wrist for that one. Always creating the relationship. Minister, you sit there to talk in language, you've got a relationship. And like again, to listen to a person in Parliament with that responsibility of a strong portfolio, stand proud and talk in language, it has an impact. And it makes me feel that, change is coming. It might not come as fast as what we want it. Again, we've got to keep the dialogue going. And that's this moving forward and looking where the opportunities lie. We want to participate in everything that we do, and we can give you the leadership. We can give you that. The question is, can you bring leadership with you? You can walk away, you can do whatever which way you wanted to do, but you know what? Our leadership will sustain. We will pass on to the next generation, and our next generation of leaders will stand on the shoulders of giants, loud, proud and strong Indigenous people, both men and women, continuing the same messages about partnerships. For us as Indigenous society to realise our full potential, to honour our obligation to repair and care for country, we can't do it in isolation of the wider community. This is only my belief. but it must be Indigenous-led within cultural science at the forefront of the way people think. This is a model that I use. It's a cultural knowledge exchange circle. Two-way learning opportunity. Building the capacity to assist water planners, fish scientists, environmental scientists, build your cultural capacity and your integrity. Engagement, free, prior and informed consent. There's employment in there with the rangers. The amount of rangers here has just been wonderful. And to hear that story, Minister, about that young person wanting to be a ranger and you know, stay on country, to care for country, be proud of that. Again, I come back to a safe and empowering space for Indigenous opinions. I use the term, we must be in a safe environment for us to have the necessary courageous conversations. And you've got to be willing to listen to them. Partnerships, facilitating meaningful relationships with community and partners. And, you know, programs, Indigenous inclusion in stakeholder initiatives and decision making. Policy development, project design. These are the things that we want to be involved in and that we can add value. Only we as Indigenous people know our cultural values and where it can fit in the dynamics of project and policy development. We bring our toolbox with us, the seasonal changes. We talk about 4 seasons. There is food for thought, there are 6 in the Indigenous society. Caring for country and repairing for country, the Gomeroi ranges and the fire stick burning. It is now becoming a national phenomenon on how, with carbon emissions burning early, it's Indigenous-led, it's cultural science. You can't put it any other way on it. I'm sorry, it's not in traditional ecological knowledge for me anymore. And I want you to think about transgressing above that and appreciating and adopting the term cultural science. This is what we can do together. These are the type of initiatives around education, developing projects, communication. You know, the two-way learning gets us to understand technical advice around the wonderful new instruments we use in Western science that can add value to the cultural science and methodology of caring for country. Communication. Anne Paulina is delivering this year's Peter Cullen lecture at the Shine Dome in Canberra, and the opening is all in language. There's something to be said about that. And workshops. You can sit in rooms like this, or you can go and sit on country under a tree, take your shoes off, immerse yourself into the dirt, into the river, into the billabong, into the wetland, and listen. Listen to the people, listen to the environment. I had one old fellow tell me up at St George, he said, yeah, the trees talk. And then he ran over and he hugged a tree. I said, what are you doing? He said, I'm just making a trunk call. No. So, you know, again, interweaving this, because the roots, they do talk. They do connect. Again, this interweaving our humour into the way we learn. On-ground works are important. There was a talk yesterday about don't create a position for the sake of creating the positions. Create the position, procurement, in tendering processes. These should be all a natural part of the progression of integrating how you engage and let Indigenous communities and nations and clans and people lead in on-ground works. 2008. This is what collaboration can bring about. That's my wetland. The Gingham Waterhole, Guida Wetlands. It is an international Ramsar site. With the Environmental Watering Advisory Group, where we sit at the table and we got an environmental and cultural release from Copeton Dam down the Guida system. That's what it delivered. Question? Want a piece of this action? Of course we do. Of course we do. I want you to think about this term about can we dance together. We can do your dances. We've done the Pride of Erin, we've done the waltz. But can you shake a leg with us? You need to think about that because we want to dance with you. But we've danced on your terms. Forgive me for being honest, we've danced on your terms for a long time. I think it's time for you to dance with us. Kick your shoes off. Kick the dust up. Which way? What, are you going to swing with me now? Nah. But it's a serious question. The Yutndali, the Goanna, we're always climbing. We're always looking to the stars and the sun. I want you to think about not being like the dinner one, going at things at a hell of a pace, because sometimes you hit a little barrier and you could end up in a destination that couldn't be any further from where you wanted to be. I want you to think about being like little Biggie Bill of the porcupine, leaving a mark, leaving a footprint for others to follow in, because it's the legacy that we are all wanting to leave, and that's where we're joined at the hip, and we can't do it in isolation of one another. The challenge is, can we reconnect that circle? And I want to say, Yane, thank you. Ta.